that she loves me. And by the way, give me more food.
Yeah.
That's what cats always say. Give me more food, give me attention.
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Good.
So
right.
Richie, if you can hear me, we're probably going to start meeting in a couple months, and we as we learn more rules from the state and the county, they will trickle down to the Parks and Rec department.
Okay, it's showtime, people. I'm going to rudely hit mute on everybody now.
See?
Bye. Well, stay there. Don't go anywhere. Listen to our wonderful meeting, which is starting at last now. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening for our May monthly general meeting of the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. It's Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. I am Mitch Wagner. I am VP Communications for the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. We have a splendid lineup this evening, including Colin Parent and Jack Shue, two Democrats on the La Mesa City Council. They'll talk about police reform, climate action, homelessness, traffic, and finding a replacement for City Council member Dr. Akilah Weber, who recently was elected to the 79th Assembly District in the state. We will also hear from Mejgan Afshan, who will tell me A, if I've pronounced her name right, and B, who's going to talk about her campaign for La Mesa City Council, running in that 79th Assembly District seat. We are following the La Mesa Council members and candidates. We'll talk with Dave Myers, a 30-year veteran of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, who will talk about law enforcement reform and also about hate groups and the rise of extremist groups in San Diego. As always, we're streaming this on our YouTube channel, so if you have friends or family who can't make it tonight on Zoom, or you experience technical difficulties and have to leave us, you can watch on that YouTube channel if all is going well. Just search for La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube, and that's how my wife joins the meetings. Hi, Julie. If you have anything you need to bring to our attention, or you notice any technical problem or anybody disrupting the meeting, please message either of my two board colleagues, Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti, or just message me. Let's begin. I'm going to unmute Tina now, and Tina Reinberg, our board president, will tell you about some things you need to know. Hello, Tina.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I don't have a whole lot. I did talk to Josh, who is the guy at the community center that we've been dealing with, and he also has information about the parks. And right now, there are limitations on being inside. They are, 50 people. They all have to be masked, and we generally have more than 50 people, so we really can't open up right now. And even at the parks, the limit is 100. And so we're just going to sit tight and wait. We'll get more instructions in mid-June from Josh as they get it from the counties. But enjoy this time because pretty soon we'll be back in person, and the hugging. Thanks very much for being here. Please, if you're not a member, please join. If you're a member and you haven't renewed your membership, please renew it. All this can be done online, and we appreciate it. We are the only club in East County that has a newsletter, and so that does cost a bit of money to print and mail. So we appreciate your memberships for that. Thanks.
Yes, if you need to join or update your membership or make a donation, you can go there by going to the website and go up to the top where it says become a member / contribute. Just click there and follow along. All right, so we're going to move on now. We're going to talk to Mejgan Afshan, who is running for the La Mesa City Council. Mejgan, I'm going to unmute you now and go ahead and tell us all a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Mejgan Afshan. As Mitch said, I am running for La Mesa City Council. I am actually the daughter of Afghan refugees that resettled in La Mesa over 25 years ago. I grew up in La Mesa. I went to La Mesa Middle School, Helix High School, a graduate and a proud Highlander, and ended up attending Grossmont College. where I transferred to San Francisco State. And in my final year at San Francisco State, I became the intern to Mayor Gavin Newsom when he was the mayor in the city and county of San Francisco. And after about a year and a half there, I ended up working as a staff assistant and aide to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi as she transitioned into her Madam Speakership role in the House. And I was very tired of politics, and I said I was going to leave. And I moved back to La Mesa. And within 6 months of moving back to La Mesa, I ended up working on the 2008 presidential campaign for Barack Obama. And I worked for the San Diego County Democratic Party as one of 2 field directors. And in that campaign, we had dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of candidates that were Democrats, and unbelievably, all of them won. And we helped create a blue wave that hadn't happened in San Diego County in many, many decades. And after that, I ended up working folks that were running for city council, like Mayor Bob Filner, and as well as city attorney Scott Peters, who was running for city attorney at the time, and a few other roles. I actually also worked for the Barona tribal government as well, before I got into my work in focusing on immigrant and refugee human rights. And at that point, I started working at the International Rescue Committee that was based in City Heights, as well as El Cajon, and helped resettle refugees that are from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Somalia, which was an amazing experience until I ended up leaving and joining the advocacy team at the Council on American Islamic Relations, where I was there for a few years, leading their pushback against the Muslim ban and all the terrible, horrible things that were happening at our border as well. And as of last January, I founded, with my co-founder, the Borderlands for Equity organization. It's a pro bono civil rights nonprofit, and we focus on bringing representation and doing advocacy for those that have been discriminated on the basis of gender, ethnicity, race, religion, and sexual orientation. And being a proud La Mesan, having grown up in La Mesa, I know that La Mesa needs to be a safe space and an inclusive space and a more equitable space than ever before. And I know that I'm the person that can help make that happen. And I'm looking for your support, not just as my home club, but as my neighbors. Thank you so much. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mejgan. We're going to leave it there for now with you, because we're going to have a candidates forum as we get closer to the election, when we'll have time to speak further. I have just learned that Patricia Dillard is also running. So we're going to give her a moment to speak as well. I've asked Patricia to unmute. There you go. You have the floor. You need to unmute.
Okay, now
there you go.
Unmuted.
Yep.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Patricia Dillard, and I have been in La Mesa. We purchased a home here over 25 years ago, and we have raised 3 children here. And I have worked in the community as well as volunteered in many capacities, especially in regards to helping to raise my children, who all attended La Mesa Dale, La Mesa Middle School, and then Helix Charter High School. During that time, I've done a lot of business. I was a shared owner in Southland Title Corporation, which I was an investor as well, that ultimately sold back in 2004 for $95 million. And I've continued to do business and sales. Also worked for AT&T for over 10 years, became a top producer for AT&T, rated number 5 in the country. I also have recently done a lot of volunteer work, going more to a semi-retired capacity. Last year, I actually was on the La Mesa Public Safety Oversight Task Force. And this year, I am currently the vice chair for the Community Police Oversight Board. And we're doing a lot of work when it comes to justice and social justice, social injustice, and as well as working on updating our police department and making it safer for people of color, especially African Americans, and our community, trying to work to bring our community back to some level of peace and serenity. I welcome any questions that you may have. I also would like for you to know that I am being supported and backed by Akilah Weber. If you have any questions, you can let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Patricia. All right, we're going to move on now. And if we missed any candidates here, apologies. We basically called on the ones we knew about. We don't take sides in elections between Democrats as a club. And so now we're going to move on to Jack Shue and Colin Parent, the two council people for the La Mesa City Council that are joining us tonight. So I'm going to do the unmute things here. And okay. All right, I think I have, there we go. Colin, I can see you. And Jack, let's, all right, you're unmuted too. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so let's start. I'll start with you, Colin. I know you wanted to talk about the plan for coming out of the pandemic. So how is the city going to help us come out of it?
Yeah, so thanks for teeing that up for me, Mitch. I appreciate it. So just wanted to just start off by just saying thanks for the invitation to speak, and just want to remind everyone at the club, including the candidates who are running, that I wouldn't have gotten elected without this club's help. And so the candidates who are here, talking to the club, engaging the club, are doing the right thing too. So good on you. So I wanted to just share the couple of things as we were talking about earlier. Tina was talking about some things about how the club's going to be dealing with coming out of COVID, and that's definitely some of the things that we're thinking about on the council, and I'm thinking about on the council too. We actually have a lot of federal monies that are coming in from the Biden administration and Congress's actions. We're going to have about $11 million coming to the city this year, which is more than a quarter of our general fund from normal years. So it's a really substantial amount of money for us. And so we're going to have to, as a council, decide how we're going to allocate that and how we can make the most of that to the benefit of our neighbors and city. When we got an allocation for that last year from the CARES Act, the initial proposal from our staff and some council members were to spend all of it on support for businesses, which I think it's great to support businesses. I think they're certainly hurting, but I also thought it was unfair to dedicate the entirety of our allocation for that. And so with the help of Dr. Weber, we were able to get a substantial amount of money being spent to help renters. That's the kind of values that I think we need to be applying to these new revenues. TBD how we're going to spend it. We're actually going to have a report on it at council on Tuesday. But we're going to have some choices to make on that front. We also have we're all meeting on Zoom right here. And for those of you who are participating on the council or viewing the council meetings, we've been on Zoom since quarantine began. One of the things that I've worked on with our colleagues is to get a subcommittee together to figure out how we can continue to use these kinds of tools to allow people to participate remotely from our meetings going forward. I think that's going to be really key to making sure that we continue to have maximum access to government and to decision making. Even when we're not required to do it remotely, a lot of people find it easier to participate remotely, whether it's just convenience, which is fine, that's a perfectly legitimate reason. But some people have mobility challenges. Some people are, they've got kids at home, and physically attending a meeting is a burden and a challenge, and one that we don't have to require anymore. And then third would be we actually have we made some efforts to make it easier for people to walk. In La Mesa during the last year, we made it so you don't have to press buttons in order to get a cross signal as a pedestrian at high traffic intersections. That's, I think, been a great success. I personally like walk around a lot now because I don't go to a gym anymore. And there's no reason why we shouldn't keep that. And so that's something that I'm going to be bringing to the council for in the next few months to make sure that we can keep those kinds of things permanent. So some of the things, we're all looking forward to getting out of quarantine. But I think there's also some lessons that we learned and some things that we can't continue forward, even when we're not required to.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. Our next subject is police reform. Jack, I know that's been an issue you've been working closely on, so maybe you can step up and fill us in on what's going on there.
Yeah, if I can, Mitch, let me comment on some of the things that Colin mentioned, just as a kind of a quick follow-up.
Please do.
Because Colin did mention the distribution of about 1.8 million, I believe, of the first shot of money that the city was received under COVID. And we're going to be getting, looks like 11 million, Colin, is that correct?
I think that's right.
In the next shot. It is so critical that we have a more progressive majority on the city council. This is where money makes a huge difference in people's lives in La Mesa. And because of what Colin and Dr. Weber did, we were able to at least have some of the money go to actually to landlords in rent relief out of those funds. And what was in play, what we lost in a vote was trying to move another $200,000 of that relief money. But we didn't get that because at that time, the conservatives had the majority. So I think it's so critical for us to have a majority on the council for these critical issues. For this 11 million that's coming, I hope we're able to defer some of the decisions that are going to be contagious so we don't have 2-2 votes, so that we can do that when we have a full 5 members on the council. So I want to mention that. Also on COVID, the council did, on a unanimous vote, buy into having a goal of vaccine equity by Juneteenth. So Juneteenth is a little bit of a history lesson, but in any case, I thought it was extremely unfair to have this disparity of some people of color, poor people, not getting the vaccine, this life-saving vaccine. So if we can achieve this, it'd be great. Let's have freedom from vaccine, freedom from COVID with the vaccine, just like we have freedom for the slaves in Texas and at Juneteenth. So that's the goal. We have a vaccine, pop-up vaccine site that we hope to have at Helix High School on May 22nd. We'll be looking for volunteers on May 15th to do a lit drop, essentially, in the neighborhoods of West La Mesa, and to try to get the vaccine equity. That's my guess is where we have a lack of distribution of the vaccine. So these are things that are happening, and the city is involved with this, as well as the La Mesa Spring Valley School District and Helix High School. It's been a great effort, and to me, that's one of the greatest threats to people's lives in our community, not just our businesses, but to actually their health. With regards to police reform, we've come a long ways. If we think of who we were 2 years ago, in this issue of trying to get the police department to relook at itself. And I'm happy that the oversight board that we now have, it has a diverse group of people that care about the community, care about how we have law enforcement in La Mesa. And people like Janet Castaños, Patricia Dillard, serving on that committee, and Tremlett, and I think Caitlin is also on this at this meeting. Several really great people here in La Mesa. All the members of the board, oversight board, are doing great work, in trying to really see what we can do to reform the La Mesa Police Department. And in some ways, they'll look at, I think, hopefully some of the specific things that happened in the past, but more importantly, to look at systemic change within that agency, that institution. Some of those issues are, as we know, nationwide problems with regards to law enforcement. And it's not a matter of just the training class. It is a matter of everything from recruitment to retention to ongoing climate and environment of the police department, the culture of the organization. And I hope that the oversight board will, through an auditor, an experienced person in law enforcement, will look at those areas of this institution and start making significant changes. We're going to have a new police chief soon that I think the city manager is getting ready to announce. When that happens, we know we'll have to work with the new police chief to make those changes and help that organization, this law enforcement agency, become better, to get additional trust from the community. And that was the intent when I worked on this with a number of other people in our community, Gene Carpenter and Joe Glidden, many Dems actually. We worked on this issue, and it's been a long time, and I think we'll finally see some fruition, some benefit in this coming year. So I'm happy to that's moving along. I'm going to look forward, and I think Colin Parent is going to do the same to make sure that the oversight board is well funded, that it has independent legal counsel, and the ability to have an independent police oversight auditor to look into this agency and this organization and see how we can make it better.
What actual authority will the board have? Will it be able to make decisions, or will it make recommendations?
It will make recommendations, but if it makes a recommendation, if the police chief doesn't take heed of the recommendations, that's not going to bode well. The police oversight boards are independent. We want to make them independent. They don't have authority in California for general law cities to hire and fire the police chief. They won't have that authority. The city manager has that. But obviously, the police chief is going to have to listen to the community. In the past, on the Chief Vasquez, when we asked him, well, how do you get input from the community? And he said, well, he talks to people, he has friends, he has coffee with the cops, he has the city council, he has other people, he was talking to us. That was his form of getting input. In this case, we have a separate body of diverse people from the community selected by the city council to provide that oversight, and to have independent legal counsel and an independent oversight auditor who can actually look at all the evaluations, interviews, disciplinary actions, and policies of the police department. Some of those documents obviously were not available to the public. They still won't be available. That's under state law. But the police auditor will be able to look at that and share some of those findings with this police board to make come up with recommendations for changes with the department. So I think that's a pretty major step. If you look at what happened with the city of San Diego and what they just had on the ballot and that was passed by the ballot, the city of La Mesa jumped ahead. The city council jumped ahead by forming this oversight board with essentially many of the same kinds of powers, oversight powers, as what the city of San Diego just did through a voting process.
Okay. So, by the way, I'd like to encourage the members to leave your questions in chat. You guys are smarter and know more than I do. So we count on your help with that. Next topic that I think we wanted to talk about was climate action. Which of you gentlemen want to jump in and talk about that?
I think it's Colin's turn.
Okay, Colin.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. So the city of La Mesa adopted a climate action plan a few years ago. It was something I campaigned on. For those of you who were paying attention at the time, it wasn't sure that we were going to have a second vote on the council if I won to get that climate action plan adopted. But we ended up getting it adopted unanimously. And I think part of that's because some of my colleagues are, were actually sort of like quietly in support of it. And some of it, I think, was people who just realized the tides were turning and they needed to be a little more, needed to recognize that this is La Mesa is a democratic town, and the climate change is real, and they should like maybe do something about it. So we adopted that. I think we also took some action recently to join CCA, Community Choice Aggregation Agency, so we can collectively, along with other jurisdictions in the region, procure a greener power mix. So we're moving forward on that. I think that's really exciting. But the real challenging parts are still left to be done, and those are really the biggest. It's great that we're doing this clean energy stuff. It's really important. But the biggest contributions to greenhouse gases in La Mesa, just like every other jurisdiction in California, is transportation. And the way that we're, and that's like cars. That's like the cars that you and I drive. Like I own a car, I drive it sometimes, and that's true for almost everyone on this call. And so in order to, the strategies that we have in our climate action plan that we actually have to follow through with are meaning that we're going to need to reduce vehicle miles traveled by building more bike lanes, building better pedestrian facilities, and building more homes near transit so that people are able to get around without having to rely on a car, be able to live near transit so that they can take they don't necessarily, they can still own a car. Maybe they're going to drive from time to time, but they'll be able to take transit to the work, to grocery stores, to education, those sorts of things. And that's hard. I'll tell you why that's hard. Is it because it's so easy for people to find reasons to say no to new homes, right? It's so easy to take that not in my backyard attitude and say, well, of course we need more homes near transit, but not in La Mesa, or not in my neighborhood, or not across the street from me. And so being able to say yes and say no, in order to meet our climate goals, we're going to have to be able to say yes to some of those things. That's going to be a challenge, and it's been a challenge so far. And when we've had those votes before our council over the last few years, people haven't always lived up to their commitments for the climate via housing. And so those are some challenges that I think we're going to continue to have. But it'll be really important to make sure that we, as Democrats, as progressives, commit to taking action on climate, and understanding that there are going to have to be choices that involve transportation, including housing.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about public transit, just because it's kind of a hobby horse for me. I would really love to see good, super convenient public transit come out here to East County. So if I go to Mystic for Greek up on University, I don't have to drive in the car. I could just take a bus or something like that. It seems kind of an overwhelming problem just because of the distance between houses. Are we just gonna have to wait for denser housing? What kind of thing can we expect to see there?
No, I think Jack, do you want to hit on this and I'll follow up?
Well, Mitch, we're so far behind with having an effective transit system. We really haven't, the late Senator Jim Mills, who passed away last month, and I actually dedicated a resolution at Sandag for him. He's considered the father of transit. The MTS building downtown is named after him. Yet Senator Mills, for all the years that I knew him, for the last 10, 15 years, would not step foot into that building, a building that his name is on the outside of it, because he was so upset that the MTS was failing us, that Sandag was failing us, that Caltrans was failing us. And if you get so far behind, 10, 20 years behind, it's going to make it extremely difficult for us to catch up. We need to catch up, though. We need to catch up in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And the orange line, remember, the orange line is a freight line. It is not a public transit rail line. It was designed for freight. It was not designed for people. And let me give you the comparison. The green line, which is the only functioning line we have now for transportation of people, starts from Santee, but most of it that was really built starts around La Mesa and goes towards downtown. In that section through Mission Valley, it goes underground. It has great separation. There's an underground station at San Diego State. It goes to what was a stadium that we had up to 30-some thousand people attend during a Charger game. The 36,000 people who attended the Charger games, 18,000 of them would leave by trolley. They would leave the area around the stadium before the cars got out of the parking lot. That's the power of a light rail system that actually is designed for that use. So we do need to catch up. On the books for a long-range project that will affect us and give us the kind of system we need is for a high-speed rail system from El Cajon to downtown. And it has different colors. It may have been called the Brown Line or some other line in the past. But in any case, that is something that the Hassan Akrada, the new director at Sandag, and others planners know we need something like that. That would give us the kind of system, Mitch, that'll get you to those restaurants on University faster than if you drove. We're talking about a modern light rail system, subway system that can go up to 110 miles an hour. The highest speed our trolley goes is 65 miles an hour, our red trolleys. But most of the time, the average speed is probably close to 30 miles an hour. And when it gets down to downtown, when it goes on city roads, I've seen a person on a scooter, those bird scooters, keep up with the trolley. So no, we do not have a good system, but we need to invest in that. And that's going to require a lot of transformations. In the near term, we're going to have to make some changes. We have to make drivers pay their way. Right now, the drivers are on welfare, and we need to stop giving welfare to drivers. And when that happens, the transformation is going to start to begin very quickly. And I think that's the hard part. That's the hard change that I think Colin was talking about. Right now, the cost recovery for roads development and maintenance is about 50-some percent, 55%, even with SB 1. That means the rest of the money is coming from other public funds that could be paying for a different kind of transit system, as well as for healthcare and education. So the drivers are on welfare, but they get to pollute too. As Colin mentioned, our greatest source of pollution is from transportation. And most of that transportation for us in La Mesa is for people driving through La Mesa. It's not in our climate action plan, and I want to put it in our climate action plan. For the city's climate action plan to include drive-through VMT, drive-through vehicle miles traveled, and that pollution needs to be changed with city policies and the policies that we can enact at Sandag. Even those regional transportation, we need to get in there at the regional level and say, we don't want that. 125 cannot be expanded. It simply cannot. That will increase VMT against state policy now. So the money that we have planned for that engineering needs to go to how we're going to change 125 traffic, reduce congestion by reducing vehicle miles traveled, not expanding it. Anyway,
Okay.
I better stop, Mitch, because I'll take up the rest of your evening if I continue.
So
All right, thank you.
before we move on, I just want to give folks just a couple of other things to think about for this. I mean, I think it's great to think big in the future, big fast trains, new projects. I mean, those things, we should absolutely think big. Those are things that aren't going to happen like today. They're not going to happen this decade. They're not going to happen next decade. It's a big takes a long time to raise money and plan for those things. Not that we shouldn't do that, but it's not even a medium-term solution. There's a lot of things that we can do right now with really limited amounts of dollars that would really improve people's transit access. So I ride that orange line that Jack likes to complain about most mornings when I go into downtown. And it's a 35-minute from station to station from La Mesa Boulevard to downtown where I work. That's very comparable to the drive on the 94 in the mornings, right? So it's a little bit longer most mornings, but it's very comparable. Plus, I don't have to pay for parking, so it's like a better choice for me than driving today, right? Now, one of the reasons that a lot of people don't take that, and there's a lot of reasons why people don't take it, but like one of the reasons is that it only comes every 15 minutes, right? And so it's only 35 minutes from station to station, but I might have to wait a full 15 minutes in order to get my train, right? one of the really easy things that Sandag can do, that Jack can do, that his colleagues on Sandag can do, is just pay for greater frequency on that same line. So you don't have to build anything new. All you got to do is pay for more union workers to drive those cars at a more frequent basis. And the agency actually, MTS, will tell you that they have enough cars to do that today. They just don't have money to pay for the drivers. So those are some very basic things that could be done to improve the total travel time for most riders with a relatively small cost. And then Mitch, to your point about University Avenue and the bus, you do the exact same thing. You just, right now there's a bus that runs every 30 minutes on University Avenue running through La Mesa. Why not have a bus running every 10 minutes, right? It's expensive, there's a cost, but it's a relatively inexpensive cost in order to improve that service.
You know, a lot of two questions. First of all, why do we always talk, when we talk about public transit, why are we always talking about rail rather than buses? Sure, perhaps that's a naive question, but
I think the answer, Mitch, is primarily bias. That most of the people who are in positions to make decisions about transit can't imagine themselves being on a bus. They can't imagine people like them on a bus. They can't imagine people they know on a bus. And so they're more interested in, they can't talk about the benefits and options for a bus. That being said, sometimes rail rail for a lot of people is a more comfortable experience. I personally enjoy the rail. It's like less curves and everything. So that's not the only reason, but I think that's one of the reasons why we have some myopia and people not being open to talk about the possibilities and options that come from a bus.
But for the distances we're talking about, Mitch, when we go to about 10 miles or so, rail is just more efficient. Rail has the capacity to take lots of people. So that example I gave at the stadium after a Charger game or Comic-Con event or even a Padre event, we don't imagine huge numbers of buses moving that many people at once, whereas a rail system can do that. And I've seen this throughout other parts of the world. We're not the first ones that are dealing with these transportation problems. So in other parts of the world, it is really a light rail system that can move large numbers of people quickly and efficiently and quite well. If we built some bus lines or bus-only lanes on some of these boulevards, that would help. But things are also changing. The transportation system in the future is going to have other options with autonomous type vehicles, shuttles, and the vans. So there are other cities like West Sacramento that are experimenting with 10 small vans. And then there's this other concept of virtual bus stops. So rather than having a set kind of route for a trip, you'll have like group share riding that a computer somewhere attached that's connected by your cell phone will figure out who needs to go where, and you could have much better service that is more catered. And you just have to be sharing that that ride in a van rather than a bus on a set route. So these are all options that are in the forefront. Other cities are experimenting with it. Unfortunately, MTS is still back in where we were before and trying to deal with set bus routes and set systems. And then people start complaining about a bus with 2 or 3 people riding in it on a set route. Those things don't have to be. There are other systems that other cities are experimenting and actually have in place now to solve those problems. And that's some of when Hassan talks about the 5 big moves, that's one of them, a different kind of operating system for our transportation system that's more efficient. And so I think we may see those changes now. We have a problem though, and because our MTS system is still similar to what we had before, and that's why, Senator Jim Mills wouldn't step inside that building. We still have that organization there. It's the same organization that supported law enforcement so much, and with the least trained law enforcement people at train stops, which was victimizing mainly black young men at our trolley stations, and also essentially had the same kind of incident as George Floyd had in Minnesota only 6 months earlier at one of our own trolley stations. So we got a lot of work to do.
Okay. All right, so let's shift gears a bit. I want to talk a little bit about homelessness. What is the city doing to help with the homelessness problem?
Well, not enough. I mean, we had a very unfortunate vote last year where we had an opportunity to get a lot of federal dollars to create some permanent homes for our homeless neighbors in La Mesa, and was not able to get support from the council to do that. That I think is really unfortunate. I do think we are still nonetheless making some positive efforts on services. We've dedicated a lot of our ongoing CDBG federal dollars for homelessness. We've contracted with PATH, a pretty substantial and influential nonprofit, to do outreach to our homeless neighbors in La Mesa. I think that's very positive. But, you know, services are really important and good, but people are homeless because they don't have homes. And if we're not willing to actually create places for people to live, then services are really only going to get us so far. So I think that's something that we're really going to need to keep pressing on with our colleagues. And for those of the aspirants who are interested in joining the council, I'm really going to be, I haven't endorsed anyone in this race. Just want you all to know, I'm going to be very keen on looking for candidates who are going to be committed to actually being willing to do something and being willing to stand up to some of the haters who don't want to do anything to help people who are struggling on our streets.
When you talk about housing, are you talking about particularly getting more affordable housing out there, or actually putting homeless people in housing, publicly supported, both?
Both. And homelessness is diverse. It's complicated. It's challenging, right? There's not just one solution that's appropriate for every person experiencing homelessness. But a voucher for someone can be good for a limited period of time, but like that doesn't necessarily solve that. Oftentimes doesn't solve a more structural problem. So we really need permanent homes. We need that. Oftentimes that's new construction, but it could be buying something and converting it to homes. Those are the kinds of the things that we need to do. And just, like I was mentioning earlier with our climate action plan, like doing that kind of stuff is politically challenging. I think it's a good idea. Democrats writ large think it's a good idea. Joe Biden says it's a good idea, right? Todd Gloria says it's a good idea, but I guarantee you not everyone agrees. And that every time you try to make some progress on this front, you get a lot of haters, you get a lot of mean comments on Nextdoor. And that's one of the reasons why we don't see progress on these issues, especially in communities like ours. And so if you want to sit on a city council and claim that you're going to try to address these issues for people, that's good, but then you also have to actually follow through with it, and be willing to stand up to people who don't share those values. And Jack and I both got elected in 2020 after, saying that we actually did want to do stuff like this. So I think the voters are with us, but you got to be willing to take some of the heat.
So a question from Dave Myers: has La Mesa used FEMA hotel voucher program?
I don't think so. I don't know whether we're eligible as a city. I know the county and large jurisdictions are. But I honestly don't know whether or not local smaller jurisdictions like ours.
I don't think we got it from FEMA. The Community Block Grant Program is funding the home program, and part of that budget goes towards vouchers. And the home program is one of our things that was implemented because we did have a homeless task force, because we did have a homeless plan led by Bonnie Baranoff, another good Dem. And someone who helped me win my election. But, we have good people in La Mesa, and we need to get this information out. The instance the vote that Colin mentioned was very important. Very few people in La Mesa came out in favor of converting the Holiday Inn into a transitional housing facility that would have over 100 units designed for transitional housing with wraparound services. Over $36 million for homeless program was essentially turned away by the city of La Mesa, by the people of La Mesa. We could have $36 million serving us in La Mesa for the homeless. The homeless have not gone away, but the services that we could have provided them was not provided because the people of La Mesa came out in large numbers to the city council saying, we don't want this, we don't want that. Can't you put it someplace else? How come we weren't told ahead of time? We need to change our attitude. We need our hearts to speak more than our fears. So I think that's where we need to go. And I hope, with the majority of the council being progressive, we can move in that direction, because that's what's important. We cannot continue to have this attitude that, oh, the homeless, well, can't they just go away? Can we move them someplace? Can we send them to jail? That's been an approach in the past. We haven't completely turned that around yet. I think the home program is helping greatly, but we need to move on that. We have many more steps to take. The homeless population may likely grow. The income disparity is growing. It's not getting any smaller.
So question from our audience, from Colin. You had talked about haters who are helping the homeless without naming names, or even with naming names. Could you be more specific there? Who's against this?
So, like Jack said, that there was a meaningful number of people who came out and opposed that particular proposal, but they're certainly not alone, and anyone who spends time dealing on Nextdoor or some of the Facebook groups, you see there's a lot of dialogue around some local public policy issues, and a lot of them are really centered around housing, right? And there's a sort of mean-spiritedness about some of that dialogue. And I don't want to say that people shouldn't listen. We shouldn't those folks shouldn't have voices and shouldn't have a way to participate in this process. We absolutely they should come to meetings. They should express their views. And elected officials should listen to them, right? And should take their considerations or their opinions into consideration. But what's one of the challenges to local government is those folks, it's a couple dozen people, and then that particular project, there was over 100 who came out and opposed that particular proposal. It can seem like to an elected official that group of people are representative of the whole, right? Because they're the loud ones, right? They're the ones who are making the most traffic online. They're the angriest, right? And sometimes there are people like their names that you're familiar to you. But it's important to kind of step back for a second on two fronts. One is to say, okay, well, really, what's the right thing to do, as opposed to what are the people saying on the internet? But then the other thing is, when you're an elected official hoping to get reelected, or a candidate hoping to get elected for the first time, is where's the 100 people is a lot of people, but it's not the majority of La Mesa, right? That's like a very small share of the city. When the city every couple of years does a poll, a survey of residents, and asks them what's the most important thing to them. And the two top things this last year were housing affordability and homelessness, right? These are the things that people want their elected officials to address. Now, that's not true for everyone. Some people would prefer that we, like Jack said, they would prefer that we just round up all homeless people and put them in jail, right? Some people actually think that. But that is, first of all, that's wrong. And second of all, that does not represent anywhere close to the majority view that actually most people want us to do things about these problems and to actually help people solve these issues in their lives and their neighborhoods. And so that's the thing. That's what good elected officials can see that and try to navigate those issues and be willing to sort of stand up to some of the, like I said, I guess haters, people who are just really, really angry and mean, and who have sort of a disproportionate influence in some of these conversations around our local choices.
So we have a question from Suzanne Till. What can we do about prevention of homelessness, particularly for mentally ill and kids under 18?
Suzanne, that's a wonderful question, because we know that prevention is really the best approach to anything. By the time homelessness occurs, the problem is already there and it's much harder to solve. So I love prevention, and I hope we can start moving in that direction and put resources into prevention. The home program addresses that to some degree. Instead of treating the homeless as criminals, we try to treat them as people who need help. and giving them the kind of help they need, whether it's transition to housing or at least a voucher to get them out of the code and get them the resources they need to try to move out of homelessness. But we don't have a lot of resources in that. These kinds of services, social services, are generally provided by the county rather than a city. So county mental health, county health department, they're the ones that deal with health component. In terms of other kinds of services we're going to do, I think providing low and very low income housing, meeting our RETA numbers, is really the approach that we should be taking. And I'm going to be pushing forward a inclusionary housing policy. So as we're building additional homes and apartments in La Mesa, particularly rental units, that we provide the kind of low income and very low income housing that we should. So far, the city has been giving away housing projects or changes in allowing developers to have their way without requesting enough low income and very low income housing units in those developments. We're going to have a big one coming up on Alvarado, where the trailer parks are next to the freeway. So it's going to be a tremendously large project, hundreds of units, and we're going to have to work on that. This is one of the problems I'm finding in our, not just with addressing housing availability, but environmental issues. We still live with the old ordinances, the old planning processes. We have not changed from what we've had before. We just follow the state rules. And for example, solar panels. I know, and we all know, that solar panels are cost effective, particularly if you put them in when you build a home. Yet we don't require that. We just require wiring for solar ready because that's the state rules. We need to get beyond the state rules and say, you need to put it in, period. It is cost effective. Let's pay it up front rather than giving a developer another way to just get by with building something at the least possible cost.
Yeah, there was an article, I think recently, possibly in the New Yorker, that said solar and wind power at this point with existing technology can basically deliver cheap, limitless energy for all intents and purposes. It's an extraordinary technological breakthrough. Fossil fuels are fossils now. Very, very exciting if true. Anyway, we have another question from the membership, getting back onto the question of police reform. We did have a riot downtown in May. What can we do to prevent a recurrence of that?
Well, I mean, I think new leadership for the department is going to be a positive step in the right direction. I do anticipate that whoever the city manager hires for that position is going to they're going to be walking into a department that's under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. And we've got a big report that we had commissioned, identifying all of the problems with what happened in that riot, and hopefully a fresh perspective is going to be willing to take that seriously and to acknowledge that some of those mistakes that were made and to identify how we can move them forward and do better next time. So I think that's really important. And and I think it's also about restoring trust between the community and the department. And I think our effort to create an oversight board that many people on this call helped with developing is a step in that direction. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think there's a lot of things we're going to have to do, and we're going to have to keep paying attention and keep pressure on this. But I do think we're taking a lot of the steps that we need to be taking, and so we just gotta keep at it and keep it a priority. And people like whoever asked that question need to keep asking us those questions.
And we're going to need lots of help from the entire community to make these changes, to continue to support these kinds of changes in our police department, to make those cultural changes, do the police reform work. But that's one side of, I think, what we need to do in La Mesa. The other side of La Mesa that we need to change is more internal, is more of our hearts. And I think that's what we really need to address. And so it's going to be a more subtle approach. That's why I wanted to have a resolution on Fred Korematsu Day, the first month I was in office. That's why I'm going to be pushing this whole business of Juneteenth and introducing the idea that we celebrate Juneteenth. We have Oktoberfest. I don't know what's the population of German Americans in La Mesa, but I got a feeling we might have just as many African American population. I know it's about 5 or 6% in La Mesa, the African American population. So why can't we celebrate Juneteenth? And by doing that, we see another part of our history and be more inclusive as a community. And I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to be pushing for some other cultural dates, using my great power as a councilman to put in a resolution. I've been getting great support from the mayor, from Weber, Councilman Weber, Colin, and of course, Dr. Weber on these changes. They see that as well. We just need to change the image of La Mesa to be this multicultural, diverse, inclusive community that cares about everybody and doesn't leave anyone behind. That's the image that we need La Mesa to be. And it's going to take a lot of work to work towards that end, but we can do it. And when we do so, just like we're starting to change, hopefully influence the council of El Cajon and Santee, we'll be the leaders in East County. We're going to change East County to be more inclusive, to care about everybody. So groups like Defend East County won't have any place at all. They will be pushed out completely. And we do that from our hearts, not by trying to think, we're better than somebody.
Okay, so that makes a nice transition to another topic I wanted to talk about. We've been seeing a rise, at least on a national level, and sadly in California, with anti-AAPI hate. So Jack, what are we seeing here in East County? Can you share your insight there at all? And what can allies like myself and other members of the board and our club do to help?
Mitch, I forgot to wear my T-shirt for you today, for all of you today. My T-shirt that I wore at the Sandag meeting last month, and it read, maybe I should just go run and put it on, but I have to turn my camera off first. But anyway, it read, it's an honor just to be Asian. It's a quote from a comedian or actress, Sandra Ho. In any case, San Diego area, San Diego County, La Mesa is not immune to the hate crimes we have experienced throughout the country, to the problems of elderly, senior citizens, senior Asians, women, men being pushed to the ground with their clothes set on fire. There's a story early on last year of a woman, a Chinese American woman in Brooklyn, in which someone decided to set her clothes on fire. It's extremely troubling, and it's really hard. It's hard when grandmothers tell their daughters who may have grown up in the United States to say, when you go out in the street, speak a little bit louder. Your English is better than mine. So when people hear that you don't have an accent, maybe they won't hurt you. So that's the kind of environment that we have. That's the kind of fear that Asian Americans have, particularly the older ones now, because they've seen what happens in our streets. In the Chinatowns, in the places we have some of the larger percentages of Asians, the violence still persists there. So it is a problem to address. There's so many ways that we need to deal with it, starting with the literature, the movies, the other things that we have grown up with that put Chinese Americans, Asian Americans in a lower place in our society by not teaching all the history and not interpreting all the history. So I think that's going to be a lot of work for all of us to do. It requires all of us to learn more history and try to tell the correct history and to dispel any hate. And when we see discriminatory actions, we call on them, we call on that and stop it. When we hear a joke that's not correct, that's off color, we address that, whether it's against Asian Americans, Blacks, Hispanics, Jews, any group. against Muslim Americans, and against immigrants. We call that out and say, that's not right. That's not who we are. Please don't say that anymore, or please learn more of your history and get it straight. These are the things that all of us can do and need to do in our communities. And I know I'm going to get support from my council members and hopefully this club as we try to address those issues in our communities. And when someone says, "Hey, how come we have to get rid of that child's book that has that is a great story, good children's book by Schultz?" We're going to have to say, there was a picture in there that was racist. That's why that book is no longer going to be printed, and we're going to put it away. We've got plenty of other books. That's what we're going to have to do, and I think that's the way we're going to have to go forward. But thanks, Rich, for bringing that forward, because it's timely and it's necessary for us to talk about it.
What can we do as individuals proactively? I mean, one thing I've been struggling with over the last couple of months is, I have Asian coworkers and friends, and I don't even know whether to say anything when there's a horrific story on the news. Maybe they don't want to hear about it. Maybe they just want to go about their daily lives. But
I think you just did the right thing, Mitch. You ask, say, hey, I know that's an effect that's affecting the Asian community, if maybe affecting you. Anything I could do for you? And,
fair enough.
And that's I think that's pretty supportive, and says who we are. If you stay silent, there's sometimes that's fine. That's appropriate. But if you know them well enough, you can approach someone and just give them some support. It's the same kind of support you would give someone who have lost a loved one. It's the same kind of support you could give someone if something traumatic happened to them, and you let them know that you care, that you feel that you know that they may be in a time of pain, and that you can provide some assistance.
Yeah, it's a good point. If somebody loses a family member and they're a coworker or something, you offer condolences, and if they change the subject, you go with it. If they want to talk about it, you go with that. So thank you. That seems like a very good suggestion there. Anything more you'd like to add on that subject before we move on to the next thing? Okay. One more point that you had also asked to talk about, Jack, was about the upcoming special election, which we heard from two candidates on a few minutes ago to replace Dr. Weber. Can you share, enlighten us a bit on what's going on there, please? So we're not going to probably be able to appoint anyone onto the city council. Looks like a pretty strong 2-2 decided vote if we do that. So inevitably, we're going to have an election for that open seat. And I don't think it's going to happen in August, so it's probably going to happen in November. I think Colin and I kind of figured that's what's going to happen. And there's been some talk about if that's good or bad for Dems in terms of turnout. We're going to need a huge turnout of Dems and progressives and liberals in La Mesa to make sure we hold that majority. So I have the results of when I was elected to the city council. I got elected in with less than 1% margin, a little over 400 votes. I got 11,580 votes, and Alicio got 11,163 votes. And Colin, of course, beat me by 300 some odd votes. I tried.
Wasn't personal, Jack. Wasn't personal.
But to have my name on the slate with Colin, with both of us endorsing each other, I think helped quite a bit. And I don't know if I helped Colin or Colin helped me. Maybe we help both each other, but he certainly got enough votes to be the top candidate. And luckily, I was the second. My margin could have been a lot more if we didn't have so many candidates on the slate. And in fact, if it wasn't a presidential vote and with a lot of Dems voting and a large voter turnout, I probably would not have won. We needed a large turnout. And luckily, we had a large turnout because it was a presidential election and there was a large anti-Trump vote. But more importantly, though, for this coming election, for this special election, voter turnout, unfortunately, will not probably be very high because it's not a presidential election. Even with recall election, it's not going to provide the turnout that we really would like to have. We only have one seat that's open. We only need one candidate to fill that seat and one candidate to vote for. If we have more than one candidate going forward and we vote for other progressive good candidates, it is like giving a vote to the conservative that may be running. So I don't know if Lothian may decide to run or Liesel may run for this seat. They're certainly capable of doing so. They may do so. And if they do, and only one of them does, we're going to have a tough time. And we'll have an extremely tough time if there's more than one progressive candidate. We can only afford to run a campaign to get one person elected. If we have more than one person that is a progressive running, we have to work much more harder to assure we get everyone to vote there. If we don't do that, we could lose this seat that we fought so hard to get, this majority seat. And I think that's critical. What that means, though, is if we don't have the majority, we just talked about the $11 million from COVID relief money, that's on the table. My seat on Sandag is on the table. How we work on things on MTS is also on the table. Things like how we're going to go forward with the preventive measures for the homeless, police reform, all those things are on the table if we just if we lose this seat. So in my mind, I'm going to be endorsing Mejgan. I think she's going to be able to get the endorsement, early endorsement. I'm going to push for her to get the early endorsement from the Democratic Club from the county, and that she's going to be the leading candidate to get the endorsement. And we only support that one candidate. A vote for anybody else is a vote to potentially lose that seat. And that's how simple it is. And I hate to be that pragmatic because I know the other candidates, many of them are very good people. And any other kind of election, if there was another seat, I certainly would vote for them and support them just as much. But in a situation like this, it's important that we have one leading candidate, the most likely to win, and we go all out to put that person in office.
Thank you.
So that's, I think, the situation we have. Colin might have more to say or have different perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think I'll just, share with everyone, I think Jack's, correct that we're likely to go to a special election on this, not to an appointment. And I think that's, there's some pros and cons, right? I mean, the generally speaking, like, I'm for elections. We should have elections, and that's how we should select elected officials. It's also really important to have elections when you're going to have a lot of participation, so you get a fair representation of where the voters feel, right? So you're talking, you may be seeing in the news that they're getting ready to do the elections for mayor of New York, and they do in these like crazy off-year cycles where like 25% of the voters show up, and like an astonishingly small number of people actually get to decide who's the mayor of New York, which is like an important job, and that's just bad. Like, they shouldn't do things that way. And it would be bad if we were having our city council elections in March of off-year elections in La Mesa. That would be bad. We shouldn't do that. We should try to do this when most people are going to show up and the voters get their actual say. So Jack and I got elected as Democrats. The other two people on the council did not. So it's not a surprise that we have a different perspective about how we select candidates for this race. But it's okay, they get to have their say and their vote, and so we just got to make sure we win. And I think Jack's is making an astute observation that the more candidates we have as Democrats, as progressives, the more challenging it is to win with one. And so I'm not ready to pick a candidate or tell people they can't run. And at the end of the day, I mean, obviously you can't tell anyone to run. If they want to run, they're going to run. But it is, I think it's worth, I'm interested in talking to everyone who's interested in running. And I do think that we should have a serious talk amongst ourselves about who has the best chance of winning, who's going to be a good vote for progressive issues, and some of that sorting oftentimes happens sort of in this pre-declaring, pre-filing kind of phase. But I will want to just say to folks who may be worried about the potential shift in makeup of the council, is if you feel like this is not the way that you want to move it forward, that you're concerned that having an election like this without full participation from voters, that let the mayor and let Bill Weber know that, and talk to them. If you have a relationship or you have their email address, talk to them. Let them know how you feel about this, because right now the only people who they're hearing from feel something different. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, elections are okay. I won a couple of elections. Jack won an election. Like we've got a track record, especially with this club. So I'm not worried about having a fight in an election. I think we can win, but we gotta be smart about it, and we gotta make sure that we're unified moving it forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Anything you'd like to add before we release you?
Just thank you. And for those of you who are thinking about running, I know I've got some emails that I have to respond to. I'm going to want to talk to everyone about it. I put my email in the chat box too. If anyone's thinking about it, talk to me. I will talk to absolutely everyone and give whatever advice I can, whether or not I make an endorsement. But then the other thing, and we should all be thinking about this, whether you're a candidate or you're a supporter or you're the leader of this, or a leader in this club, if we're going to have a special election in November, boy, we're going to have an election real soon after that too. And so the people who are going to be running now, whether you win or lose, you should be looking at running in 2022 as well. And if we get, let's say we have a special election and we have a bad outcome, boy, we should run in 2022 and take that person out, right? Like this is a moment, and it matters who gets elected in a special, but we ain't done after that. So everyone needs to keep our eye on the prize, understand that if we're going to have this election, we're going to roll right into the next election cycle, because we had a time where we had a firm blue majority on the Mesa City Council, and there's no reason why we can't have that going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening to both of you gentlemen, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thanks, everybody.
Our next speaker this evening is Dave Myers. He is a long service with the Sheriff's Department, former candidate for sheriff in 2018, and is now a advocate for police and law enforcement reform. And he's going to talk to us about that subject, and also about the subject of extremism and hate groups here in San Diego, and in particular in East County. So thank you for joining us, Dave.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm going to share a screen here. And everybody see that okay?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, so what I hope to do here tonight is bring together a conversation about the intersectionality of what some of the discussions around criminal justice reform and hate groups, and what that means when we talk about law enforcement reforms. And please, along the way as we're going, if anybody has any questions, if you're unmuted and stuff and you just want to blurt them out, I think this is the best way to communicate, and the best way to for all of us to learn. And again, I am just speaking from 35 years of law enforcement and what my experience has been, and what I think we need to do in going forward in the law enforcement realm. So
actually, I'm going to stop you there for housekeeping thing. Everybody's muted just because background noise and whatnot. But if people type messages in chat, I'll see them and I'll relay them to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
So 1 in 3 African-American boys born today will have criminal justice involvement, which means incarceration. 1 in 6 Latino boys born today will have criminal justice involvement, which means incarceration. 1 in 17 white boys born today will have criminal justice involvement or incarceration. What are hate groups? What does it mean to be a hate group? Anybody, what is a hate group? Anybody?
Oh, everybody's muted. So
Everybody's muted. Okay. So it's, any class of individuals that don't espouse to certain individuals. It doesn't necessarily mean that the group has to engage in any criminal conduct or anything like that. For those that have been around long enough, in San Diego County, I was born and raised here. Remember Tom Metzger? Based out of Fall.
No, I don't.
Local leader of the Ku Klux Klan. So in my early career in law enforcement, I had involvement in working with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which took a civil suit actually to get him out of San Diego County. So what groups are mostly targeted by hate groups? Why? And so we see that race, ethnicity, and ancestry. Well, think to yourself, what groups can you think about? Jack Shu talked earlier about AAPI hate. We also have anti-Semitic. We also have LGBT, based on sexual orientation, religion, gender identity, disabilities. Do we discriminate against those who have disabilities? And I'm gonna get into that a little bit later about why. When we talk about criminal justice reform and we talk about the role of policing, what we've seen in the last year is an increase in hate crime. And is there a correlation? And I say there is. And I say there is because I think, and it's based on my experience, that law enforcement is not educating its officers on what to ask hate crime victims to properly document hate crimes. Thus, we see an underreporting of hate crimes in our communities. I'm going to narrow the focus a little bit here on the East County, specifically, and some areas of La Mesa. I heard earlier some folks talking about Defend East County. I think anybody that's been aware of the year prior and the year prior to that, post George Floyd murder that we all witnessed and the protests that followed, is a resurgence of and an emboldenedness of hate crime groups and individuals that feel it's okay to drive around with a swastika either on their face or on the back of their car. And this is here in San Diego County, and this is here in La Mesa. We saw a group spring up called Defend East County, and a social media group that sprung up as a result. We recently learned of the Facebook group, Defend East County, and individuals involved in it, where a white supremacist back in Georgia had contacts for individuals here in La Mesa who were part of the Defend East County group, whose discussions surrounded around and were present during the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Now, what does that mean for us here in La Mesa? We've seen an attack on the only Black female school board member in the La Mesa Spring Valley School District, and the individuals that now are pushing for a recall effort. We've also, for several years, heard from the FBI, the CIA, the DHS, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, about what the greatest threat to our homeland, to our national security now, is posed by violent white extremists. And why is that happening? Why is that happening now? And a lot of our intelligence agencies are describing events which have emboldened these groups. And it's the discussions around some fraudulent election that took place, the breach at the US Capitol, and if we can believe it, the results of a pandemic, the need to wear masks. And this has emboldened these conspiracy groups. And what has led to a lot of this emboldenedness is individuals across our country that, and I'm going to tie it back to criminal justice reform. How many of these individuals that you see on the screen here who have died at the hands of white vigilantes or police officers have been held accountable? I'm going to drill down even more here and bring it back to San Diego County. Here in San Diego County, and I'm sorry about the small print on the left-hand side here, but there was an evaluation done of every county sheriff in the state of California, all 58 counties. They were rated based on levels of police violence, accountability, and approach to policing. And what we have is, at the very, very bottom, the worst record of police violence, the worst record of police accountability in our local sheriff's department is San Diego County. They have the worst record of all 58 county sheriff's departments. San Diego County Sheriff's Department is known for having the highest rate of inmate mortality of any sheriff's department in the state of California, of the largest jails run by sheriff's departments. Since 2009, 159 people have died in custody. 80% of those people have not been convicted of the crime for which they are still in custody. And they're still in custody because the current sheriff has not adopted any sort of bail reform efforts. And 82% of them are men, and they're from our BIPOC communities. What's the result? The result is record taxpayer dollar settlements paid out to families. Instead of reforming the efforts, what we are seeing is record dollar amounts being paid out because of negligence. We really do not know what's going on within the county jail system because the sheriff is not transparent about what's going on. The county does have a county law enforcement review board. It is 30 years old. In my opinion, it's outdated and it's antiquated as to the expectations of the community. One of the mandates of the County Law Enforcement Review Board is to investigate all jail-related deaths. Now, this is important because there had been so many jail deaths that the County Law Enforcement Review Board had to dismiss without review 22 cases because they were so overwhelmed with investigating what those meant. So there have not been any investigations into the 22 jail death cases that took place. So we have no pattern and practice investigation that took place, nor what that could possibly mean. And also what's important here is the Oversight Board only has, based on charter, authority over sworn law enforcement. Now there are equally number of important issues that relate to medical and mental treatment of those in our custody. If there is a death related to the lack of medical or mental care in our facilities, our County Law Enforcement Review Board publicly has stated they have no authority to investigate. What I started probably over 6 to 8 months ago is a request, and several Democratic clubs have signed on to a letter to ask our state legislators who have the authority to ask for a joint legislative audit committee to look into what's occurring within the county jail system here in San Diego. It would be similar to what former assembly member Todd Gloria, now mayor of San Diego, asked for, if you remember, during the hepatitis A outbreak in San Diego County, where a joint legislative audit committee came in and investigated the hepatitis A outbreak and government's response to it, and provided a report to the county and to the city how to better coordinate services. Now, as a result of that, what recently happened was a resolution that was passed by the San Diego Democratic Party unanimously to send a letter on behalf of the party endorsing a joint legislative audit committee investigation into the county jail systems. That doesn't mean that this club cannot also, as a club and its members, sign on to and ask its local state representatives to sign on to the same letter. So with that, I'll stop sharing and am prepared to answer any type of questions or anything that may have come up.
So do we have any questions for Dave from our members? While we're waiting for that, I mean, I'll just ask you more about kind of the threat of extremism in East County. I mean, we have seen Defend East County. Are there other groups, or is there cause for local concern here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that none of our police agencies here, you know, we saw a lot of police agencies across the United States talk about their law enforcement who were involved in the insurrection at the state capitol. Now, whether you were actually there or whether you participate in groups online that talk about similar or same things, that we don't have any law enforcement agencies, and this really concerns me, that we don't have any law enforcement agencies in San Diego County that have actively looked into that. There are, I mean, I was present at an event in La Mesa, a Black Lives Matter event in La Mesa during the times in which we could and should assemble last year. And there were lots of individuals who I know personally over the years of being in law enforcement who subscribed to the idea of white supremacy, white nationalism, and took several pictures of individuals that were carrying large axes and knives on their belts, and actually supplied that information to La Mesa police officers. And I was very surprised as to their lack of concern. Their lack of concern as to these individuals who were there with these weapons. You know, I'm not in the habit of naming these groups because I don't want to give them any type of notoriety or anything like that. But, you know, it doesn't take much to, if you're a follower of some social media sites, especially in the East County, that you do see a lot of these individuals pop up. And I'm sure a lot of our elected officials hear from a lot of these individuals, whether it's Colin or Jack. And when it comes to certain issues, they will use social media to chime in and talk about their ideology. And their ideology, in my opinion, is one of division, one of hate, and doesn't further the cause of democracy and bringing everybody together as communities.
Okay, we have a question from the audience here. How has Sheriff Gore been allowed to get away with his immorality? Do so few people care about what's going on?
Yeah, I could be here all day talking about that one. You know, I think it gets down to the voters unaware of. I mean, how many people on this call actually know that they can vote for sheriff? You're a La Mesa resident, but there's lots of people I talk to that say, well, I live in El Cajon, or I live in La Mesa, or I live in San Diego, I can't vote for sheriff. Well, that's not true. Everybody who's a registered voter in the county of San Diego can vote for your chief law enforcement officer, and that chief law enforcement officer affects a lot of things within how law enforcement across the county is provided, even in La Mesa. If you, Colin and Jack talked a little bit about and there was questions earlier about what happened in La Mesa and the riotous situation and everything. Yes, La Mesa Police Department is my police department. But if you remember, Sheriff's Office responded and took command of responding to riotous situations in La Mesa. And during the after action report that Colin and Jack talked about that La Mesa paid for, the Sheriff's Office refused to participate in providing any input on how to make things better. So our direct vote on who the sheriff is matters in the entire county of San Diego.
Maybe a little civics 101 here would be in order, because I have to admit I am unclear on what the responsibilities of the sheriff and the sheriff's department are and how it is distinct from other police agencies. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The sheriff's department is the chief law enforcement officer in any county. The sheriff, by constitution, has to run and maintain the county jail system. So anybody arrested in the county, arrested in La Mesa, gets taken to the county jail system and is cared for there. If within the county jail system, if anything occurs where there is a misjustice within the county jail system of somebody who is arrested in La Mesa, and there's liability that's associated with that, it could be traced back to the originating agency, which could be La Mesa. The sheriff is also responsible for maintaining court security in all jail systems. The sheriff also sets the tone and standards for how policing occurs in a county. So if the sheriff wants to set a policy and practice on domestic violence response, homeless response, the sheriff can do that. The sheriff currently, for example, would allow, and in my opinion, has allowed for a response to those who are unsheltered, for municipalities like La Mesa, for municipalities like San Diego, to arrest unsheltered individuals and allow them to be booked into jails, even though the sheriff has the discretion not to allow bookings of non-violent, non-felony charges. And that exacerbates, in my opinion, the whole idea of criminal justice reform and how we are trying to reduce, let's say it's hepatitis A, or whether it's the spread of COVID from within the jail systems. And so how criminal justice throughout the county is expected, the standard can be set by the sheriff in a county.
Okay, thank you. All right, looking back through the chat a bit, Miriam Plotkin wants to make a motion to take this up as an emergency issue. Thank you very much, Miriam, but tonight is not the forum. Need to discuss this among the boards and come back. This has been going on for since 2009 at least. It's not something we're going to solve tonight. It was a comment from Diana Larson that I urge everybody to just scroll back to and read about Tammy Blevins. We have a question from one member sent to me privately wanting to know about community-oriented policing and your opinion of that, Dave.
Yeah, you know, that's a Band-Aid. In my opinion, that's a Band-Aid. Community policing should be the standard, not a specialized unit. I mean, we have in policing, and I truly believe in policing, and I do not subscribe to the idea of defund the police. I think as an example, what Colin and Jack talked about tonight, and what so many others on this call, whether it's Janet or other individuals, when it comes to accountability within police agencies, is transparency and accountability. Our police agencies respond to accountability, and our police agencies respond to transparency. Whether it's the newly formed Police Accountability Board in La Mesa, Patricia and Janet are on it, and we were on a conference call the other day about how to now request certain information. And there's tons of data within our police agencies, tons of data. And if the public were to find out what our policing agencies are doing, it's going to create an atmosphere in which our police agencies want to change and will change policies. And there are certain laws that are now being pushed at the state level, which talks about decertification of bad cops. And I think, in my opinion, a vast majority of good cops want to see bad cops never have to work or able to work again in law enforcement, especially in California. You know, whether it's La Mesa. I have a lot of friends who are La Mesa police officers. And an example, Officer Dadges, who was the huge problems for La Mesa, talked about how he was a problem officer for years and years, and those within the agency knew about it. But the laws and policies within the agencies and those in command level continue to pass on the problems associated and never addressed him. So community-oriented policing is smart policing, but it should be the norm, and it's not going to be the fix for policing agencies.
Okay. We have a question, came to me in a private direct message. I'm not quite sure, candidly, I'm not quite sure I understand it, but maybe Dave does, and maybe we can get it repeated if we need clarification. But according to what I wrote down, it says the LA County Board of Supervisors is seeking a way to change the sheriff. Something about the next election and how can we replace him earlier? What options do we have?
Yeah. You know,
okay.
I do understand it. Yeah, I do understand.
Good.
LA County Sheriff's Department is a little more unique because they passed a charter amendment literally decades ago when they had a problem sheriff, and it was it was specifically addressing limited powers of their sheriff, but it was through the budget process. Sheriffs do have a tremendous amount of authority because they are independently elected. They are countywide elected. Not just by districts, but Board of Supervisors do have some sort of, authority over a sheriff, and it's through the budget process. But again, once the County Board of Supervisors approves a budget for a local sheriff's department, how the sheriff spends that funds is totally the total discretion within who the sheriff is. And how the sheriff spends that money. So once that budget is approved and it's approved for the sheriff, then it's similar, and it's unlike police departments. It's unlike cities like City of La Mesa, where you have a city manager who appoints a chief, and although the chief may have certain authorities, once that money is approved and that budget goes to a police department, how that chief spends it is really within that authority. So it's very, very, very important how we elect sheriffs or appoint police chiefs.
All right. We have one more question, and if there are no more questions in chat while we're doing this one, this will be our final question. From Rob Howard: if all the Republicans and half of the Democrats are voting for a law and order sheriff, how do we change the outcome and get Democrats at least to vote for a restorative justice sheriff rather than one who just looks the other way when it comes to bias and bigotry in law enforcement?
Sure. I'm going to have to, my good friend and the person who I supported for mayor in Oceanside, Rob Howard, would have to kind of disagree. When I did run for sheriff the first time, I did receive a large portion of Republican votes. I gave our current sheriff, the incumbent, a good run for his money. A lot of, when I did run at the time, it was a primary only election and there was a 39% turnout. So in my opinion, it was voter apathy. A lot of Democrats didn't turn out. What's going to change going forward for any election for county-wide positions in the county of San Diego is they all have to go to a general this time. They cannot be decided in a primary. And if you remember the last time, the 39% voter turnout in the primary, but there was a 62% voter turnout, a vast majority increase in Democrats in the general, and that was when Gavin first ran. So, it's voter turnout. We continue to see a dramatic increase in registered Democrats. We continue to see the manner in which people are voting now, which is by mail. The governor recently signed the 2022 elections are going to be by mail. Us here in La Mesa, the 79th Assembly, saw the voter turnout where we saw for the 79th special election where roughly 69,000 people did vote. Nearly 67,000 of them were by mail, and the vast majority of them were Democrats. So we do see a changing environment, which I think, in my opinion, favors Democratic turnout and independence. And it's a matter of education. And I think the awareness, all we have to do is look back to the who took to the streets after George Floyd died to protest and support Black Lives Matter. And it wasn't what some have been calling the typical activists. It was you, it was me. And a lot of the people on this call I saw there. And so I think a lot of the environment is totally changed.
Okay. So a question from Janet Castaños. Is the Police Officers Association creating a problem for police departments by protecting wayward officers?
Police officers associations, deputy sheriff associations, they're protecting their members. It's a, I'm strong union family. I grew up in what it means to be workers' rights and safe working environments. And I think there has to be a reckoning from our elected officials who should be held accountable to what it means for, look how much money Deputy Sheriff Association and the Police Officers Association spent against Akilah Weber for state assembly. Look how much money they spent against Akilah Weber when she first ran for city council. I think it's still just an organizing thing. There are going to be groups that oppose certain ideals and individuals. I still think we need to have a conversation with those groups. And I still think that Police Officer Association, Deputy Sheriff Association do have valuable input. And we need to have the conversations. We're not going to always agree with them. I'm not going to always agree with them. I used to sit on a law enforcement association board of directors, negotiated contracts, safe working conditions, premium pays. for working bomb squads and flying helicopters and stuff like that. I think that's very, very important. But I don't think we should shut down the conversations and diminish what they may be able to provide. We're not going to always agree, but we need to have those conversations still.
Okay, so when does Sheriff Gore come up for re-election, and how can we get rid of him?
Yeah, the sheriff's, district attorney, and the two other county-wide races are coming up 2022. The primary is June, and the general is November. And
Okay, so June 2022 for the primary.
Correct.
Okay. Do we know at this point whether Sheriff Gore will run?
I don't know. Every indication is that he will not run. And just based on the individuals I know within the department, he has been trying to leave early. If you remember, last year we had a significant Board of Supervisors election. He was supporting the incumbent, Kristen Gaspar, and he was supporting Steve Voss out here in our area. His goal, and I have this on good authority, was that if they won, he would then leave early and he would have the ability through them to appoint his successor. That did not work for him. Thankfully, Tara Lawson-Remer won and Steve Voss did not, and he did not support Joel Anderson. And so he does not have a majority. So if he were to leave early, it would be up to the Board of Supervisors to either call for a special election, which would not make fiscal sense one bit. Calling for any special election to fulfill a year or a year and a half doesn't make sense at all for any governmental agency. So the Board of Supervisors does not have a majority for him to leave early. And so he continues to, I think, in my personal opinion, is he's simply going to run out the clock and retire.
Okay. All right. I guess that would do it before we release you. Is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
You know, it's thank you. Thanks to the club, my club, the leadership of the club. I know Tina and Chris and so many others, Linda and so many others on this call here have been very supportive of law enforcement reforms in the past, continue to push for law enforcement reforms. La Mesa, in my opinion, has been doing a very good job through Jack and Colin as two of the members, Akilah, and actually Bill Weber and the mayor, Dr. A, have been pushing for reforms in La Mesa. Don't give up. Don't just think because we created a civilian oversight board that we need to sit back and relax. Janet, Patricia, and so many other on the board, the newly created oversight board, need your support, need your voice to continue to support them and support those efforts going forward. And on the broader perspective of law enforcement, stay tuned post-July.
Okay, great. That's a cliffhanger. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. All right, so we're gonna move on now. First of all, we have a reminder once again to please join the club if you are not already a member. Please pay your dues and your membership, and donate if you've already done those things and have a couple of more dollars to spare. We can use the money to help elect Democrats and advance a progressive policy. Go on the website, Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club.com, and look up at the top where it says dues and membership. And with that, we're going to make some time for local leaders to talk about things that are important for you to know about. I've gotten several direct messages from people who are eager to speak, but I have a tiny little brain and can't remember things. So I'm going to ask everybody who wants to speak, please just click that raise hand button on Zoom, and we will get to you as it comes up. And the first on the list, because it is alphabetical, is Bianca Bravo. Well, Bianca Bravo, we'll start there. I'm going to ask you to unmute. All right, go ahead, Bianca.
on behalf of Dr. Priya Patel. Priya is a council member representing District 3 in Carlsbad, and she's running for California State Senate District 36. Priya represents Carlsbad on the Clean Energy Alliance, or the CEA. As member of the board, Priya strives to protect our beautiful coastal environment and save money for local businesses and residents with competitive energy rates. Priya will push for a more sustainable future, and her work on CEA gives people the option to purchase cleaner energy and create new local jobs throughout the region. As Carlsbad City Council member, she voted to pass the 50% renewable energy, 75 carbon-free energy mix as the default option for ratepayers in Carlsbad because it provides maximum flexibility and still provides savings. In addition to clean energy, she will continue to work with businesses to have greener practices, such as the reduction of single-use plastics. She also facilitated conversations between environmental organizations and local businesses, including Legoland, to work together to reduce and eventually transition away from the use of single-use plastics. She made a historical push for Carlsbad to divest from fossil fuels. As board member of the North County Transit District, she advocated to provide greener alternatives for transportation accessibility and affordability while continuing to build our public transit infrastructure in North County, San Diego through innovative solutions like the Carlsbad Connector. As state senator, she will continue to advocate for investment in public transit infrastructure in both North County, San Diego, and South Orange County. So together we can move to get forward sustainability. Thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, I will leave our website and campaign manager's email in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Doug Case. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. I'm Doug Case. I am the Political Affairs Director for State Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. The most important thing happening in the legislature right now is the adoption of the state budget, which must be approved by June the 15th. A couple of weeks ago, the state senate released their budget proposal, which they're referring to as Build Back Boldly. The good news is, you may recall a year ago, we were looking at a $54 billion budget reduction primarily because of COVID. This year, we're looking at a much different situation. Revenues were up $19 billion beyond what was originally projected. And we received $26 billion in support from the federal government, thanks to the election of President Biden. And so that gives the state senate, gives the state the ability to do a lot of things they wouldn't normally have a chance to do. And the state senate is proposing that we make some, once in a generation transformational changes in the state budget. And I will put in the chat a link to the Senate plan, but I'll give you just a real brief overview. It deals with 8 key areas. One is to help small businesses and nonprofits bounce back. Next is to create a path to a universal 0 to age 3 childcare and education. Third is making a debt-free college a reality. Fourth is addressing homelessness, housing affordability, and home ownership. Fourth is expanding access and affordability of healthcare, including making it available to undocumented workers over the age of 65. Previously, we provided healthcare to those under the age of 25. Investments in wildfire prevention and resilience, and also investments to mitigate the impacts of drought. And finally, to improve the state systems, and all this while putting money back into our reserve funds so that we have rainy day funds available when our next crisis occurs. We were able to manage the current crisis because we put money into reserves, and it's important that we continue to do that. So I will put into the chat the document that there's just a lot of really progressive ideas that are being proposed, and hopefully you'll take the opportunity to read about them. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Always a pleasure to hear from you. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Tommy Howe. Welcome, Tommy.
Hey, Mitch, thank you very much. And it's great to see everyone from the La Mesa Democrats. It's been a while. San Diego County Planning Commissioner Tommy Howe. I'm running for San Diego City Council in District 6. That includes Mira Mesa and also Claremont, Kearney Mesa, Miramar, Sorrento Valley, and the southern neighborhoods of Rancho Penasquitos. I'm the founder of San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action. And I think some of you may recall I was also the 2018 endorsed Democratic candidate for the San Diego City Council District 6 seat. In the last 2 years or so, since the 2018 campaign came to an end, I've been working for the Rewild Mission Bay campaign. I've been serving as the coordinator for that effort through the San Diego Audubon Society. I think many of you are aware that the environment is obviously very near and dear to me, but the reason I'm running for the seat in 2022, a lot of it's the same reason as to why I was running in 2018. We're coming out of the pandemic, we're getting vaccinations, we're starting to get the pandemic in the rearview mirror, and yet a lot of the problems that we had before 2020, they're still with us. And there's really none more indicative in District 6 than what is essentially the city of San Diego's infrastructure failure. We have roads that are 50 years old that absolutely need to be rebuilt from the ground up. And these aren't some cul-de-sac. These are critical arterials that are used by school buses, that are used by MTS routes. That's something that we need to get fixed. That's something that we need to get some attention on. District 6, when I think the city of San Diego looks at it, they see the Convoy District, they see Sorrento Valley, but these aren't necessarily where people live. And we don't necessarily have a La Jolla or a Scripps Ranch or a Del Cerro or a Ranch Bernardo in District 6. We really are the last middle-class blue-collar community north of Interstate 8, certainly north of the 52. And so we'd like to get some more attention on here. While downtown gives itself symphony halls and sports stadiums and ballparks and convention center expansions, we need streetlights. To Colin's point, we need effective bicycle lanes. We need to get our infrastructure and our streets and our sidewalks rebuilt. And if I can just deviate real quickly, the presentations tonight have been extremely informative and extremely interesting. We have a real problem with white nationalism, white supremacy, straight lines, in some cases from the military to police departments, sheriff's departments. City of San Diego take advantage of the qualified immune doctrine. There have been numerous Public Records Act requests, PRAs, that have gone unheard by the City of San Diego Police Department. These are concerns that we have to address as well. And I'd like to invite all of you to join all of the D6 candidates, the Democrats that are running tomorrow evening with the NAACP. We'll all be presenting before the full body. And if you go to my website, tommyhowe.com, HOUGH, tommyhowe.com. I'll drop it in the chat. There's a link for it in there, and we'd love to have you there for that. I certainly would. Again, it's Tommy Howe running for San Diego City Council in District 6. Lots of issues to talk about, but I appreciate the time tonight, Mitch, and I really enjoyed the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Akilah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Akilah. I recognize a few faces. Meryl, I tried saying hi to you before, and I know Suzanne was on here a little bit, and I know, oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good to see everybody. I used to work for Amar Campanajara's campaign for Congress in California's 50th district, but now I am the campaign coordinator for Sarah Jacobs, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. So I will be your point of contact if you ever want to be involved in the campaign. And I know Sarah's been kind of in and out of the district, so hopefully we can, when COVID allows, we can see each other. But right now, I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to give you some quick legislation updates and some community updates. So just this past week, Sarah has introduced the Universal Child Care and Early Learning Act with Senator Warren and Congressman Jones. Congressman Jacobs is super passionate about children education and especially reducing childhood poverty. Something I didn't know is that 500 childcare centers closed in San Diego during the pandemic. And we knew they were struggling before, but with this issue has just exacerbated it. And so really proud of Sarah, of course, and this bill really is going to ensure that people don't spend more than 7% of their income on childcare. She also led her class on a letter to President Biden, urging him to support the permanent expansion of the child tax credit. And what that is that is going to be part of the American Rescue Plan. And instead of just having it for 1 year, we want to extend it for 5 years. She also introduced HR 2378, with Oklahoma Congresswoman Bice. And this is a bipartisan effort to prevent military families with disabilities from having to pay for their accommodation updates in military housing. So this responsibility would fall on the Department of Defense rather than the financial burden on the family. Another thing she's been up to in the House is she's introduced the For-Profit College Conversion Accountability Act. What a mouthful. And this has been with Congresswoman McBath and Congresswoman Manning. And what this does is it ensures people, especially veterans and those in military families, from not being victims of predatory for-profit higher educations, because we all know that higher education is priced as a luxury, but deemed a necessity. And we want to make sure that everybody has access no matter where they are in life. And in terms of some community updates, Congresswoman Jacobs was actually here over the weekend. She joined the San Diego LGBT Center in support of their Dining Out for Life program, which raises funds through dining out at restaurants and bars and getting takeout and all that fun stuff. And it helps support the center's HIV services and prevention programs. I'm going to go ahead and send you all my little email if you want to get in touch with me, but I'll be hanging out with you at future Dem Clubs meetings. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you for joining us, Michaela. All right, next we're going to hear from Kent Lee. No, next we're going to hear from Emma Bishop. Keep this in order here. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Emma. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm kind of like a new member to be. I do live in La Mesa, and I was, again, invited here by George Gassel, who's on the, I think, the Lemon Grove City Council. So he's all very involved. And so hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I guess the thing I want to share, if you guys are interested, is so I'm involved with the FCNL, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and they have, they're like a lobbying group for mostly like liberal issues. They're like a Quaker-based group, but they include people who of all faiths and backgrounds. And I'm actually helping put together a training. They're doing an advocacy training on May 20th in the evening. I can put in the chat the info, but this is, they want to form an advocacy team in San Diego because we talked about the blue tide tonight, and there is kind of a need for more like progressive voices coming out of San Diego. And these are teams that the FCNL, which is a national body, kind of helps support so you can build relationships to your local representatives. And that can include people like Sarah Jacobs, but also like the state senators. Like we met with staffers for Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla last week. And they mostly lobby on like peace issues, so anti-war measures, et cetera. But, you know, we'll see what comes out of it. So if you're interested, you can DM me and I'll put the info in here, but that'll be May 20th in the evening. And so for those who want to get politically involved on like the more lobbying direct advocacy front, this could be a great way to at least get some tips. And if you're interested, maybe help me start a lobbying team here in San Diego under the umbrella of this bigger organization. So if that's interesting to you all, I'll put that in there. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we're going to hear from Kent Lee.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kent Lee, and thanks for having me towards the tail end of this meeting. I was calling into the budget hearings this evening and having some arts and culture discussions afterwards. My name is Kent Lee. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I am running for San Diego City Council to represent District 6 and to build a stronger, more compassionate, and more inclusive San Diego. I'm a first-generation Asian American, 15-year resident of Mira Mesa, where my wife and I are raising our 2 young children. I'm actually a nonprofit leader as well as a community volunteer. I currently serve as the executive director of Pacific Arts Movement, which just completed our 10th San Diego Asian Film Festival Spring Showcase this last weekend. Also have served as a board member of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group for over 8 years, and I'm a founder and current co-chair of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, which, if you're not familiar with, is a group that formed in the pandemic to combat hate and racism impacting API communities during COVID-19. I'm running for the seat at the urging of the community, and because I really strongly believe that representation absolutely matters, especially in a district where more than 1/3 of our community is API. Because of that, I'm not running just to get one person in office. I'm running because I believe that we need to consider how we empower future generations to build a pipeline for support in our community and for the party. I'm running to fight for social and racial equity, to uplift working families, and to support small businesses in the recovery ahead. I'm especially excited to share that since we've launched in the last month, we've actually had a tremendous amount of momentum and support. We're building an extremely broad and diverse coalition, including members of every town council, planning group, geographic Democratic Club within the district. And so I'm confident that we'll have not only the manpower, but the necessary resources that we need to ensure that we flip D6. For those who are interested in learning more, I'd be happy to share in the chat my website, which is kentlee4sd.com. Again, my name is Kent Lee, and I'm running for San Diego City Council to represent District 6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kent. All right, so I see one more speaker for this open mic portion of the evening, and then Tina Reinberg is going to speak. If there's anybody else who wants to speak, now is the time to raise your hand. Michelle, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I want to thank people for the vote of confidence. I was reelected as the regional director for Area 20, which of course includes Assembly District 79. I actually ran unopposed this time. The California Democratic Party has elected its leaders for the next 4 years. Rusty Hicks is the chairperson. Betty Yee is our self-identified female. David Campos, our other than self-identified female. April Barrett is our controller, and Malahat Rafi is our secretary. And the only other thing that I want to bring people's attention to is please start thinking about redistricting. I'm sure you've heard that we only lost one Congress person throughout California with the census data that was released. That's what it's looking like. I was afraid it was going to be 2. So we will only have 52 throughout California. Obviously, all of that will be redistricted, but so is everything else, your hospital districts, your water districts, school districts, city councils that have sub-districts. So please take a look at all of these, because this really does make a difference in, as much as we go out and walk precincts, if we don't have decent boundaries within our districts, it's not going to do us a lot of good. So have a good night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Now Tina Reinberg is going to come back, our club president, to tell us about something else that we need to know about.
Hi, I know it's late. We're all ready for bed. Tagging off of what Michelle just said, we may not know the number of our districts, but we do know we're all in the state of California, and we do know that we're going to have a recall and we need to fight it. There's many organizations, online Facebook pages, groups you can join. The Go team is probably going to get involved. I have a scary statistic to share with you. In the county of San Diego, the average, the number of Go team members under the age of 40 was 2%. The number of the average age of the Go team members over the age of 65 was 60%. So if you're young and no one's ever come to your door and talked to you at your doorstep, that means you don't have a Go team representative. We don't have Go team representatives in every precinct like we want. So talk to me, find me. This is the best way you can help all of the candidates get elected is by being involved in the Go team. And we're going to fight really hard at the central committee to make sure our recommendations we won't be fighting dem on dem violence. We'll give the voters all of the names so that they can all make that decision together. But anyway, fight the recall, get involved in Go team. That's the best thing we can do this year. Thanks. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Tina. And now it's time to button it up. Thank you to all of you for staying with us and joining us tonight. And we hope to see you again soon in real life. We expect to see you again soon in real life. Join us for our next meeting, which is Wednesday, June 2nd. We're going to have a speaker from the Sierra Club talking about climate change, and we'll also talk some more about political extremism and hate groups in San Diego County. Look for a replay of this meeting on our YouTube channel. Just search for La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube and subscribe to the channel while you're there. Also look for links to the video on our website, Facebook page, Facebook group, and Twitter account, or in email updates soon. The website is lamesa-foothills-democratic-club.com, or if that's too much for you to type, lmfdems.com. The Facebook page and group have the same name as the club also. Yes, we have a page and a group because Facebook makes no sense. On Twitter, we're LMFDems, and if you want to sign up for our email updates, go to the website and look for the Get Email Updates link at the top of the page. And while you're there, join, pay your membership, or donate. Thank you to the board for their hard work arranging this meeting, and also thanks to our guests and to you for spending some of your valuable time with us. Good night, everybody. Stay healthy, stay sane, and we'll see you again soon. And to my wife, if you're still watching, hi again, Julie. I'll be out of my office and we can